We have reached the end of the second week here in the 2018 session, and of course it got a little busier than it did last week. Things started to pick up in committees. For me, most notably, was some of the activity, I guess you could say, in the House Appropriations Committee. We were getting updates on the governor's budget as presented during the State of the State address. We were updated on that by Sean Sullivan, his budget director. Came in and tried to, at least clarify some of the specifics in the governor's proposal. Obviously, of note in that budget proposal that he outlined in the State of the State address was his desire to see an additional $600 million into the school finance funding over the next 5 years. Obviously, this is in response to the Gannon versus the State of Kansas lawsuit, and a lot of people feel that's a adequate number, although questioning the 5 years. I think some people would probably like to see this done over a 3-year period, thinking that the Supreme Court would probably be more amenable to that. Now, there is some confusion out there that I'm hearing from my constituents, and that is the fact that this is not the Supreme Court's idea. The Supreme Court is an appeals court, so this was actually a lawsuit filed in the Shawnee County District Court, and it's referred to as the Gannon versus State of Kansas lawsuit. It got appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, so they're just reacting to that. And of course, they've already, ruled on it as far as the constitutionality, and to my knowledge, not really brought out a dollar figure as yet. But at any rate, the $600 million figure is one that's come up a number of times. That's going to unfold over the next few months as far as some of the specifics of that. I always look at the governor's budget proposal as kind of our starting point, our working document. And so in the Appropriations Committee, we'll spend a lot of time looking at everything, not only just school funding, but, corrections, mental health, all kinds of programs and all the different agencies. And so the testimonies and the presentations by all the agencies will start up before long. One of the things, a couple of the little highlights that he had in his budget proposal was the governor had suggested that teacher pay be increased in the state of Kansas, so that it would be higher than any of our neighboring states. Right now, Kansas ranks lowest, fourth lowest in the country on teacher pay, and he'd like to see that brought up to where we at least match our other states. We are losing teachers to other states due to pay concerns. Also, the governor had in his State of the State address a proposal for adding a number of school psychologists and counseling positions. I believe he noted that he'd like to see 150 per year over 5 years, and that would be paid for with about $100 million appropriation. A little fuzzy on where that money was going to come from, but nonetheless, he did have that in the proposal, and there is a need. And as we see these things come about in that budget, we have to come up with the money and how to pay those. We have seen increased revenues each month, probably going back to August, and in fact, we're over $100 million ahead year to date on tax revenues. So things are looking pretty good in that regard, even though we'd like to see more. The State of the Judiciary was presented yesterday by Chief Justice Nuss. This is an annual thing that he comes into before a joint session of the House and the Senate, talks a little bit about the history of the Judicial Council, and also talks about some of their needs. And obviously, one of the things is the need for increasing pay for judicial staff. We're seeing a lot of people leave those ranks, having a hard time recruiting people because of the low pay, and he was asking for an additional $22 million in new money so that they could retain some of their people that have those skill sets to perform those jobs, especially in the areas of court clerks. And we also heard from him that there are a number of judicial staff people across the state that are actually holding down a second job in order to, make ends meet, and he would like to see those pays increase. Big news on Thursday was the vote by the State Finance Council regarding Lansing Prison. You've probably heard in the news the need for replacing Lansing. It's in very much disrepair just because of its age. and they would like to see a new prison built. Now, the plan was to enter into an agreement with Core Civic. It's an organization that would fund this project, and then the state would be set up on a lease purchase. That vote was to take place by the State Finance Council, but according to the word out there, is about 10 minutes before that was to take place, the vote was canceled. I believe there's some concern over Core Civic, and I don't know the specifics on that. Lastly, the governor's nomination for his ambassadorship was approved by committee in Washington, D.C., and so people have been talking about that. We don't know when the actual full vote of the Senate comes up. Well, that's a wrap-up for this week. We'll have some more updates next week.